Welcome back to our second half of Cambridge Inside Out.
This time I get to swear.
Oh my gosh. I'm still Robert Winters and he's still Patrick Barrett.
Or Judy. Judy's fine. Judy's fine.
Okay,
I think
all right, yeah. Yeah, we just sort of like having the kind of the gender balance, you know, so.
We are in Cambridge, it's
Yeah.
fine, it's all good.
There we go.
Hey Fleischman.
All right. So one thing, I don't want to dwell on it too much here, but I thought maybe we could mention, it was last week, let me just say here, there's this week, actually starting right now, the city council is having the budget hearing for the school department.
Spending our tax dollars.
Right, so I believe that's happening at the Sullivan Chambers. So if you're really, really hot to trot for school department budgetary issues, get your butt up to City Hall right now.
If you are hot to trot for that, we should talk first before you do that.
You know, there is a sort of subset of the population who really, really obsesses on school department issues, and it's typically and understandably parents.
Oh, I'm a parent. I am very concerned about how we spend our dollars, but I'm more concerned about diapers and formula right now. So we're not.
There we go. All right. Well, maybe things will change. We'll see.
They better change.
You know, and I don't think anybody's got anything to complain about this year. I think the school department got a hefty increase in the budget this year to cover many things that people want, perhaps not everything. But
well, considering the size of their budget, I mean, if you're not getting, it's a huge budget, and
it's absolutely huge budget. Yeah.
They do get. I think no one ever gets exactly what they want. So.
Right. So anyway, that's happening. But then tomorrow morning, bright and early at 9 a.m., is the second half of the regular city budget hearings. The first half. I mean, I'm not going to run through all the departments here, but what they basically do is they split all the city departments into roughly a half in the first, which happened last week, and then the other half this week. It's coming week. And the city councilors let it be known in advance, generally, if there are any particular budgets they want to have a discussion about, and then they kind of wave through all the other departments without discussion. So anyway, tomorrow morning, again, I won't go through them all, but I'll mention a few of the big ones. And it actually kind of maybe affects us, because we usually meet on second Wednesdays?
We do.
Tomorrow morning, however, Public Works is going to be doing the budget committee, budget hearings, water department, I don't know if electrical is.
I still expect you, John Nardone and Jonathan Shaw, to see you Wednesday morning.
I don't
you
think
must
so.
leave that meeting.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
So anyway, we'll talk about that. But the water department, a few others, community development department, some of the big ones are going to be before there. Again, I have the list. If you go to the Civic Journal, the underlined ones are the ones that have been pulled and they'll be discussing.
Have the hearings been exciting? Any controversies?
Well, last week, which I think was they did it on, it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday morning. You know, they pulled a certain number of budgets. You know, there was some, you know, it was interesting, but I think the one that kind of stuck out in my mind was the Election Commission. Now, the Election Commission basically is a service department. You know, it's the registrar of voters, conducts elections. If there are certain ethics regulations where they have to get statements of financial interest from city departments. The individual election commissioners, as they spoke about at this meeting, they're actually responsible for recruiting and hiring and managing all of the people who work on election day. Right? So there's a job to be done there.
Pretty important job.
You know, there has always been an issue about, well, you know, because everybody who serves on the city boards and commissions does so without any salary. Election commissions do take a salary, right? But again, they're also managing people, so I would argue it's justifiable. Anyway, there is a question that can be had about this, but what happened at the budget hearing was a bit surly. There was a letter or some communication that was sent to city councilors from a certain Gary Mello.
Who's surprisingly not so mellow.
You know, he could be a funny guy, but you know, he just decided that he was just going to really start axing away at some of the election commissions. And one councillor, Nadeem Mazen specifically, basically just took this letter from Gary Mello and just started going point for point and driving it right in it directly at election commissioners, directly at city staff, pretty much asking them to account for themselves, explain, justify their salaries, things that it's not even clear to me that that's even consistent with the city charter.
Is a city councilor a paid position?
A city councilor is a paid position. Perhaps we should ask them to justify their salary. But nobody thought to do that, did they? Right? Anyway, it led to a rather bad reception.
Yep.
People at the election commission were very offended that they were being assaulted. And truth is that because of their specific role as election commissioners and staff of the election commission, they're in a position where they do not want to be seen as coming back and getting into an argument with an elected official.
Right.
Because of, there would be perceptions that somehow they would be biased to do so. So they're basically just sitting there having to get assaulted verbally and just having this, just mildly trying to, push back a little bit, but they can't really come right out. So
how inappropriate.
It was pretty damn inappropriate. And there was a letter, because now it's sort of rolled it back till this week. There was a letter on the agenda for the city council meeting, which happened on last night, Monday, from Councillor Craig Kelly saying first he couldn't be there because he's on a conference on resiliency and climate change elsewhere. Hippies. But that he wanted to apologize on behalf of the city council to city staff for how they were mistreated at the budget hearing.
Now that is appropriate.
In the meeting, it was kind of interesting and a little testy at the end of the city council meeting because it was the very last agenda item, where the mayor said if she intended to exercise her charter right, because I think Councillor Kelly wants to speak on the matter when he gets back next week. But he said she offered if anybody would like to make any statements before I exercise my charter right, and then I want to make a statement, and she did, and she was very, very directly critical of Councillor Madsen for his misbehavior. And he was snickering while she was doing it, and it turned into quite a back and forth, and leaving with a very heated moment.
Mayor Simmons is not someone with whom I'd like to tangle. If I may offer some advice, Councillor Madsen, leave that one alone.
Leave it alone, right? But instead he was pretty much kind of threatening to affect her election chances this coming year.
Perhaps there would have been a more appropriate time to talk about it.
Perhaps so. And now maybe we'll see a little redo of this at next week's city council meeting, because Craig Kelly will be back and he's already let it be known he wants to speak to this issue. So maybe people will just kiss and make up between now and then. Who knows?
Nice?
Wouldn't that be nice? Anyway, tomorrow isn't the second of the city FY18 city budget hearings, and I presume at least some people have kind of taken this to heart, and everybody will be respectful.
Maybe we should bring popcorn for the next one.
Maybe so. I'll go up there for part of it. But again, I do work for a living, so I can't stay forever. So that's budget hearings this week. I don't know that there's a whole lot else to say about public meetings that have happened, and I don't necessarily feel like going through the upcoming schedule. But there are some sort of big issues that are floating about that are yet to be resolved, and perhaps will be resolved as we sort of head into it. One of the big issues, actually, I'll sort of mention two. So let's go for Airbnb first, all right? One, two, that. So it was, I think, recognized by some, I think generally around the country, City of Boston, the State House, and definitely in the City of Cambridge, that the phenomenon, the growing phenomenon of short-term rentals is something that needs to be looked at.
Yep.
Things that people are currently doing, perhaps under the table, maybe should be made legitimate.
Right.
There should be some regulation, maybe certain things that people are doing that shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Well, it's like any new phenomenon, which short-term rentals are not a new phenomenon, but the ease through which services like Airbnb make it have sort of amplified its use.
Right.
And in urban places where there's a lot of foot traffic, where the hotel rates are pretty high, Airbnb has been sort of a nice solution for people trying to travel to a city to get whatever it is they need to get done, but for a much cheaper rate. The problem with that is it lends itself into sort of a commercial hotel use.
Right.
And that's been the push.
Right, and commercial hotels are regulated.
Yes, and
have
taxed.
been regulated and taxed. So, one of the arguments people had was, well, if people are effectively running a kind of a scattered site hotel usage about the city, why shouldn't they be regulated and taxed and treated just like hotel uses? And also, the other thing about hotel uses is that there are certain places by zoning where they're allowed, and some places they're not allowed. They might be viewed as a desirable use, and other places perhaps as an undesirable use.
In Cambridge, wherever a short-term rental is allowed, there's sort of a licensing process for that. So even if it is allowed, you still have to go through that process, which most people, actually I'd say probably all of them are not currently doing that.
Right.
Just a little bit of disclosure, my wife and I love using Airbnb all the time, but I'm also building a hotel in Central Square, so I have a little bit of a foot in the fire, but by and large I've been very supportive of Airbnb as a use because I don't see them as being a direct competitor with what I'm trying to do.
Actually, some of the people, at least one of the proprietors of one of the better known bed and breakfast outlets in Cambridge, who you might view this as Airbnb as sort of a direct competitor to them because they're kind of small scale bed and breakfast kind of operation, even more so than like a Marriott hotel, right? Airbnb would seem to be very, very direct competition. But she said no, she actually, when she's overbooked, she refers people to Airbnbs.
Yeah, well, and that's where Cambridge especially and specifically, the hotel numbers room rates are pretty high, but the availability is also very limited. The occupancy percentages here are very, very, very high.
Certain parts of the season especially.
Oh yes, well I know.
Like graduation.
Well, for May, forget about it. You can't get a hotel within the 128 belt, but the cost is prohibitive, and if you're a family especially, or if you're more than one or two people, most of the hotel rooms around here are no more than 300 square feet. So you're not really getting the space that you need, or you have to rent 2 rooms, which doubles or maybe triples the cost.
Right.
So Craig Kelly is the one who forward the first round of
there were a few city councilors. I'm guessing it was Leland Chung, it was Craig Kelly, but Craig Kelly really deserves the credit.
Yeah, he's done all the
carrying the ball.
Him and Will
Durbin, who's his aide. And I'm not a big fan of city council aide positions, but Will has done tremendous work in this.
I think city council, when they're thoughtful and they've been such an open processes, this has been a very good thing. So those one-offs you kind of are
when city council aides are actually working, like really doing research and helping draft things.
Like when someone gets an idea to usurp Article 19, and you're like, what? And you spend your whole summer going to hearings, and you're like, why do we have to do this? That kind of stuff.
Right. I don't like the booking personal appointments aspect of city council aides, but when they're really doing real work, then that's good. If they're serving the whole city council at that level.
And what he's trying to do, I think, is limit the negative behavior, like guys who are buying triple deckers and turning them into mini hotels. Which, I mean, even no matter which side of the fence you're on, that's not what
it's a little bit of a talk.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the concerns I have too, which is, already just the cost of buying housing. If you wanted to buy, like when I owned a triple decker, but at once upon a time that was something you could actually buy.
You should turn it into a hotel.
No interest in that. But the thing is that just buying, because the potential to condoize things have really dramatically increased the market value of triple deckers, 2 and 3 family houses. It's amazing how undervalued they were once upon a time, but then the condominium phenomenon caused the prices to skyrocket.
And increase our tax base.
And increase the tax base. So I know I agree. But in terms of the affordability of housing, which worked for me, so that I could provide my own affordable housing and also provide affordable housing for others, that was a sort of pretty good, having a lot of 2-family and 3-family homes is a big part of the equation.
When you have limited, once upon a time, but now, I think maybe I know where you're kind of going with this. There's many factors that contribute to the cost of housing in Cambridge. Number one, in my opinion, being supply.
Oh, I agree.
So
I completely agree.
Limited supply just just changes the equation.
Right, and that, I think a big change was a national phenomenon of people wanting to move back into cities. So, it used to be that when you got enough money, away you went. Right?
I should be in Marblehead right now.
There you go, right? But the world reversed, and that's had a huge effect. But one concern relating to the Airbnb question now is that if a person is considering buying a 2-family or 3-family based on the value which is driven by the capacity to run it as an Airbnb, it changes the math, right?
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Yeah.
So running an Airbnb, say the way that the current ordinance that Kelly has proposed would allow you to take a triple decker, a 4-unit building, a 2-family or 1-family, and rent 1 unit.
Right. So and that caps it pretty well.
So the income generated by that Airbnb could be 3 times what the average rent would be. Could be.
Right, but it's just one unit then,
Yeah.
so it's still capped.
It's still capped, and I think that people who are buying an Airbnb, certainly a bank would not look at an Airbnb use as a metric by which they could determine the value in an appraisal or for a loan.
Right.
However, some people, for some investors, that may be part of their calculus. I just don't think that, especially if you're looking at one unit, given it's really a bunch of different things, but the management of that is about 30% to 35% of the total income generated by it.
Right.
It's a heavy cleaning, heavy maintenance, and if Craig's petition gets through, there'll be some licensing fees associated with it, which I think there should be. I just don't think it changes the math that much.
I don't think that proposal does. One thing that there is actually 2 competing proposals. One is the city council petition, which is really drafted by Craig in conjunction with his colleagues and the staff. But there's also one called the Cockrell petition.
Yeah.
And that one kind of came in, actually, none of the petitioners even showed up the night it arrived, because it basically it's a sort of a sky's the limit kind of version of it.
Kind of wonder where it came from.
So under that one, a person would have the license to just come in, buy a 6-family home, and just basically run it like a hotel.
So that's true.
Anywhere.
An interesting fun fact about that petition. I'm not sure if an attorney drafted it because it's terribly written, but it's difficult, which makes it a little difficult to understand. But they're limiting the areas of the city where Airbnb or short-term rentals could be used. The council petition, which seems crazy to me but awesome. It's a much more liberal petition. It allows for this use throughout the entire city in our very tired BA districts, where are supposed to be neighborhood business districts, but they're pretty much now residential districts. But it makes much more sense in that respect. And I think I've told Craig multiple times, I'm kind of shocked this is coming from the council because it's so reasonable. No offense, council, but normally that's not what I'm used to seeing.
Right.
This Cockrell petition limits the areas in which you could have it and sort of creates 2 paths of resident versus commercial use. And it almost seems as if they're suggesting having mini hotels is something that's a good idea, and C1 multifamily zones, which is not a good bad idea.
I live in, like everybody else it seems in Cambridge, we all live sort of cheek to jowl with our neighbors. And there were some concerns, legitimate concerns. I always feel like when new neighbors move in a building next door to me, you almost have to break them in. So the first weekend they have a big loud party, and then you sort of yell and scream at them, and maybe they respond, maybe they don't. Eventually you start calling the cops on them, but then after a while, maybe if you know their landlord, except that nowadays the current property owner next door is a bit of a schmuck. But the thing is that
total schmuck.
But the thing is that eventually you can kind of tame the tiger, and you can get along, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe you'll even get to know them, and they go, okay, we're sorry, we were like.
Imagine such a thing, knowing your neighbors.
So, but there is a real legitimate concern if, in fact, every week it's a whole nother group or another people, and now if it's just individuals coming in as opposed to a gang of college students, they're going to be pretty. They're not going to be that offensive.
Sort of the brilliance and simplicity in Craig's petition is that I'm going to call it Craig's petition. Is that there's a residency component that's required, so you have to be a resident. You have to claim that the building that you're renting as an Airbnb or a short-term rental is your primary residence, which I think adds a layer of control that you want to see, and accountability.
It's a natural intrinsic control. Yeah.
If you know who's the owner of the home, you know who to go to with this
That's
issue.
That's it.
And as somebody who knows lots of folks who use Airbnb in the city, both as a host and as someone who, like myself and my wife, using the service, it's there is a vetting process, and they are just as tied to that income or that big a stable thing as anybody else. They don't want there to be issues.
They don't want to be trouble.
And I have a friend of mine who does it, and I won't say where he is or what he does, but he has a 2-family, and Airbnb has changed his family's life. He's one of those crazy people that at age 32 decided to have 4 children. I have 2. It's like, what the hell? But this allowed a level of flexibility that they never would have had.
Right.
And I'd hate to take that away from
It gives a lot of flexibility for people who have already raised their family and now they still have extra bedrooms, and it's actually kind of an interesting thing for them to do. They actually enjoy doing it.
Yeah, lots of people who I know who are hosts and like have a regular group of people who come to their homes.
Right.
They know them, and it's like a nice way to meet people in the city.
Yeah. So the accountability that's built into the city council petition that went from Councillor Kelly, I think, is smart in this respect. The other petition, I think they basically would require that there be some service or phone call you would be able to make that would be who knows where.
A management sign similar to what you'd see like on a multifamily
right.
building.
So in other words, if you're the neighbor and there's something terrible happening next door,
call XYZ company.
You have to call here, who's maybe based in Ohio, who they send somebody out or something. It really very poorly written. I hope that
just makes you wonder who put it out there and why.
Right, but I hope and I assume that the councilors understand what the process is, because the thing is that they actually the Cockrell petition came earlier, and there are some funny little business under state law about if you vote it down, it can't be a comparable one can't be considered within 2 years. So if the planning board gives the thumbs down to Cockrell and the city council would vote to give thumbs down, then they wouldn't be able to take up their own petition.
Correct. So city council, if you're watching,
just let it lie.
Let it lie.
Do not act on it. So take word from wise men.
This is probably the only time we'd ever say, don't do anything. Just
please
don't do anything.
Just let it lie. Right? Okay?
On file it goes.
Exactly. So, and I'm not always convinced that the city councilors understand their own procedures. So it's, please.
But for Donna Lopez.
But for our wonderful city clerk, Donna Lopez. All right? Now, another matter that is before us quite a lot these days, especially around Harvard Square, is there was a council order calling for some regulation, rather harsh regulation, very heavy-handed regulation of property owners who leave properties vacant.
Yes. I think this is spawned by folks who are exacerbated with the owner of the Harvard Square Theater, and that being vacant for about 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And
which is a problem.
It is a problem, yeah.
I think everybody agrees.
I think the scariest part of what's before the council, what's been put forward, is the 4%.
4.17% per month.
Yeah.
Fee of the assessed value of the property.
Effectively making you so you'd have to pay almost 50% of the value.
50% of the entire assessed value would be then assessed in fees.
Annually.
So in 2 years, the assessed value. Now that is so obviously a regulatory taking that I think any lawyer who failed to see that should basically be thrown out of the state.
So I think that's where it runs into the ground.
I think the city staff has already pretty much said we'll have to do some rewriting here, councillors.
Yes.
And they've said okay.
Well, I think a lot of people have been crying out to the council, citizens that is, trying to say, there's lots of vacancies. Central Square has some as well. We need to do something about it, and I think the typical move is to sort of the heavy-handed regulation. Instead of what the council probably ought to do, just in case they're listening, is to talk to the property owners who own these properties, engage them in a process, and give them a vision.
Or maybe better than councilors talking with them, get into a conversation with your local like Central Square Business Association, Harvard Square Business Association, Chamber of Commerce. There are a lot of other parties who may have better lines of communications.
I think you're absolutely right. In this particular instance, the private sector is probably the best vehicle to do that. And the business associations, the Chamber of Commerce, I'll say, Gerald owns a lot of property, Gerald Chan, in Harvard Square and in Central Square that for the most part are vacant. He recently bought Keezer's, and he's a very nice guy. I've met him a couple times, and I think, for a guy like that, who, he's doing all sort of other things, trying to save the world. It's, this other stuff that he's doing in real estate is probably more of a dealing with his management companies that, you sort of have to give them a vision and show them the way. And I think that's what they're really looking for.
If you have $1 billion or so to spend, sinking it into Cambridge real estate is actually a pretty smart thing.
Pretty safe thing.
Pretty safe thing. A lot safer than some foreign currency market or something.
So. I have a hard time thinking of anything safer.
Really? Exactly. So you bought a few properties.
I have.
So smart guy, right? So I think that there's better ways to deal with
Yeah.
some of these property owners, Gerald Chan in particular, of having actual conversations, friendly conversations, where you have some ideas. You know, don't come empty-headed.
Well, I mean, I think there's other side of that as well, because there are lots of other property owners who've been here for a very long time, who've been keeping vacancies in their storefronts, and for the, you know, it's annoying. And
Or residential properties.
Or residential properties, and it's something that, you know, affects the local businesses. You know, where Toscanini's is, and my property in Central Square, we have a vacant lot where Massa Main is supposed to go. It's been vacant for almost 5 years now.
Right.
And that has had a detrimental effect on the businesses that we serve, that are my tenants. And while there's a project plan for there and they're going forward, there are other places throughout the city where this is occurring that, you know, I think something like what the council is proposing might be appropriate, but certainly not 4%.
No. So I think maybe sort of a registry.
How about
I think
$500?
They're floating some ideas about, well, if you leave it unoccupied, maybe you lose your occupancy permit. You have to get a re-occupancy permit. These are interesting ideas.
Yep.
You know, so
I
maybe
think actually Carlone had that idea.
he did,
My
absolutely
God.
did.
All right, Dennis,
So,
2
right,
points.
There you go. Right? So there are some good ideas on how to sort of gently prod people.
Yeah.
But let's face it, sometimes this is because of dysfunctional families who can't make decisions.
Yep.
Vale Court being one example. There are other situations where a place might be vacant because they actually had a hard time renting it. You know, because of the shape of this place or whatever. You know.
Now, I will say, as a property owner and as an evil
We're under a
landlord,
minute.
you know, that's the case. But sometimes renting is not the difficult thing to do. It's
Right.
just an unwillingness. But it's both things.
Right. There are other situations. We have another property in Central Square. I won't name it specifically, where the owner has long-term plans in theory, so will not sign a long-term lease. So basically, he has to settle for only short-term leases, and you know, only certain people are willing to sign such a lease.
We know who you are.
We know who you are, right? So anyway, there are reasons. It's not a one-size-fits-all category, but it is something that needs to be addressed. And you know, I think the city council's interest in it matters.
Yep.
I think they've got to do a little revising before they really settle in. So
Okay.
anyway, another half hour has gone pretty quick.
My
Patrick.
God.
So,
Time flies.
Nice
You're
having
having
you.
fun.
so anyway,
you.
we'll see you again next week on Cambridge Inside Out.